Wow. Okay, just look at the sheer scale we're dealing with here. We're talking about roughly 80% of India's population and nearly 1 billion, yes, with a B, adherents worldwide. The tradition we usually call Hinduism operates on a massive, literally global scale. It's an absolute powerhouse of a world religion. But what if I told you that the way we normally categorize it or even name this ancient tradition might be entirely wrong?
Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here because we're about to set out on a really fascinating journey. We're going to demystify one of the absolute oldest living religious traditions on planet Earth. Now, to do that, we need to completely drop the idea of a strict dogmatic creed. Instead, we're going to explore this tradition as a fluid, organic tapestry. It's not a single set of rigid rules. It's much more like an intricate braid, woven together over thousands and thousands of years.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To break down a subject this complex, we're going to examine 5 tensile strands that weave it all together. First, the eternal way. Then, core beliefs in sacred texts. Next, epics, gods and goddesses. After that, society and the caste tension. And finally, devotion, worship, and yoga.
Starting things off with Section 1, the eternal way.
So we actually need to bust a pretty major myth right out of the gate. The term Hinduism itself, it's actually a relatively new word. It was coined by British writers back in the 1800s as an outsider's way to kind of bundle together the incredibly diverse religious ideas of the Indian subcontinent. Now, contrast that with the tradition's true ancient name that a lot of followers use, Sanatan Dharma, which translates to this beautiful concept of the eternal way or the eternal religion. And that totally shifts your perspective, right? It's not just a bounded system of beliefs, it's a timeless way of life, deeply focused on spirituality, morality, and living in total harmony with nature.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer, mind-boggling age we're dealing with. I mean, if we trace the roots of Sanatana Dharma all the way back to the Indus Valley civilization, we're talking the 3rd to 2nd millennium BCE, it is arguably the oldest living religion on Earth. And here's the wild part. Unlike a lot of other major world religions, it wasn't founded by one single person. No founder. Instead, this early spiritual knowledge was passed down orally by ancient sages, eventually written into the sacred Vedas, and by the 4th century CE, it had naturally spread and established a dominant presence all the way into Southeast Asia. It's quite literally an unbroken chain of human wisdom spanning millennia.
Moving right along to Section 2, core beliefs and sacred texts.
At the absolute center of this doctrine, you'll find 2 deeply interconnected concepts, Brahman and Atman. Now, Brahman is the uncreated, eternal, infinite, all-embracing ultimate reality. Basically, the source and the ultimate goal of all existence. But here is the really beautiful part taught in the Upanishads. Atman is your individual self, your soul. And that individual soul is fundamentally connected to the supreme reality of Brahman. The ultimate realization here is waking up to the fact that your innermost being is completely identical with that supreme cosmic universe.
Let's move to and see how this builds the actual mechanics of the soul's journey. Human experience is totally driven by action and desire, right? And that generates karma. Every single action has consequences. Good actions bring positive results, bad actions bring suffering. Pretty straightforward. But this karma essentially binds your spirit to an endless, cyclical series of births and deaths. That cycle is known as samsara. Now, because the physical world is inherently flawed and impermanent, the ultimate goal isn't to just keep coming back. The goal is moksha. Moksha is total liberation. It's the ultimate emancipation from that endless cycle of rebirth, allowing the soul to finally return to that permanent, eternal reality we just talked about.
Of course, this vast doctrine is anchored by some incredibly rich, ancient sacred texts. It all starts with the Vedas, which are essentially 4 ancient texts containing hymns and rituals. Building on that, we have the Upanishads. These dive deep into explaining those really profound cosmic truths about the soul and the universe. And then ultimately, you have the Bhagavad Gita, which famously features Lord Krishna teaching the warrior Arjuna about performing his duty without being attached to the results. Together, these texts absolutely form the backbone of Hindu thought and morality.
All right, shifting gears to Section 3, epics, gods and goddesses.
Storytelling is such a powerful unifying force. And the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, they aren't just dry, dusty history books. They are sprawling, living, breathing narratives where literal deities enter the human drama to teach righteous behavior. They're telling these epic stories of duty, honor, family values, and that classic eternal struggle between order and chaos.
And by performing and passing down these stories, millions of people get to experience themselves as members of one single massive, imagined family.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the divine personality is conceptualized. While there are obviously many gods and goddesses, the three main male deities, known as the Trimurti, represent the active, ongoing cycles of cosmic existence. You've got Brahma, the creator of the universe, Vishnu, the protector and preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer and transformer, who actively removes evil to bring about necessary renewal. Together, they perfectly mirror that eternal, cyclical nature of time and reality we were just looking at.
But listen, the pantheon is absolutely not limited to just the male deities. The goddesses play a staggeringly vital role here, giving us this incredibly balanced representation of divine feminine power. Just look at the lineup. We see Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and prosperity, Saraswati, who embodies knowledge and wisdom. You have the great goddess Durga, representing absolute power and protection. And of course, Kali, the fierce goddess who destroys evil. This deep integration of the divine feminine is totally central to the entire tradition.
Which brings us to Section 4, Society and the Caste Tension.
So looking historically, early visitors to India were often really struck by its highly stratified social structure. There's a well-known ancient Vedic hymn from the Rig Veda that actually describes a cosmic origin for this. It essentially states that, at the beginning of time, a primordial person named Purusha underwent a sacrifice that literally produced a four-part social order, or Varnas. Brahmins, the priests and teachers, came from the mouth. Kshatriyas, the warriors and nobles, from the arms. Vaishyas, the commoners, from the thighs. And Shudras, the servants, from the feet. This is the foundational, ancient vision that eventually evolved into the thousands of complex birth groups we see later.
And this actually leads us to a pretty fascinating inherent tension within the tradition itself. Hinduism is, by its very nature, remarkably pluralistic. It totally embraces the idea that different people can approach truth from completely different but equally valid perspectives. However, as this quote points out, this highly context-sensitive thinking has sometimes been used to legitimize systems based on privilege. Basically, if you believe that no single standard applies universally to everyone, it becomes way too easy for one group to justify its dominance over another in the social realm. It's a really profound historical contradiction between spiritual tolerance and rigid social hierarchy.
And finally, let's explore Section 5, Devotion, Worship, and Yoga.
So, the crucial point is how everyday people actually interact with the divine on a personal level. A massive, truly unifying practice is puja. This is the act of honoring a deity, usually with a home or temple image. And it almost always involves offering sacred food, which is called prasada. The idea is that the divine receives the offering and then gives the blessed remains back to the worshiper. It's this beautiful, intimate cycle of hospitality and grace. And logically, these everyday practices create this amazing equalizing bond, right? Where all human beings share a direct connection with the divine.
And that concept of an equalizing bond completely exploded into what's known as the Bhakti, or devotion movement. Bhakti was a real game changer because it emphasized pure, loving faith over rigid rituals or strict doctrines. It was championed by these incredible poet saints who wrote in everyday vernacular languages, and they came from all genders and all social classes. They essentially critiqued those rigid caste boundaries and upper caste mediations, asserting that true passionate devotion to God completely transcends any social class. It contributed so much to a vibrant common heritage of protest.
And bringing it all back to today, the timeless message of Sanatana Dharma is still incredibly vibrant. It's alive in globally recognized practices like yoga and meditation, which originated right here to balance the mind, body, and soul. It comes to life in the massive, vibrant explosions of joy during festivals like Diwali, the Festival of Lights, and Holi, the Festival of Colors. These ancient traditions of inner peace and colorful celebration are literally continuing to inspire millions and millions of people all over the modern world.
So, as we wrap up today's explainer, we've really seen how these strands, the doctrine, the epic stories, the societal structures, and the everyday devotion, all weave together into one massive braid. Sanatana Dharma teaches us the truth is just way too vast, way too multifaceted, to be trapped in a single dogmatic creed. It openly invites us to view reality from a multitude of perspectives. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. If truth cannot be encapsulated in a single creed, where will you look for it next? Keep learning, keep questioning, and thank you so much